Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I am Tanvi Taneja. And for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in London, Julia Chapman. Hello, Julia.
Thanks, Tanvi. It's 11:30 a.m. in London and 12:30 p.m. across Central Europe. Coming up, another strike against Houthis in Yemen, a small early victory for Nikki Haley in New Hampshire, and China's human rights record goes under the microscope. But first, the headlines.
Israel suffers its highest one-day death toll as 24 of its soldiers killed in Gaza. The US and British forces strike Yemen's Houthis again. Donald Trump faces his last remaining Republican opponent, Nikki Haley, in a primary election in New Hampshire today. China undergoes rare scrutiny of its human rights record at a key UN meeting, with Western countries calling for more protections for Xinjiang Uyghurs and greater freedom in Hong Kong. And Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to participate in Parakram Diwas, the birth anniversary celebrations of freedom fighter Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in New Delhi this evening. Up first, updates from West Asia. Israel's army has said that a total of 24 Israeli soldiers were killed in an attack in central Gaza, making it the largest single-day loss of life for the military since the conflict began. Israeli military spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari told reporters that Hamas terrorists had fired rocket-propelled grenades at a tank. He further added that at the same time, an explosion occurred in two buildings where forces had planted explosives in order to destroy them. The buildings collapsed onto the troops. Israeli President Isaac Herzog released a statement thereafter on what he said was an unbearably difficult morning. DD India's Sarah Coates reports from Tel Aviv.
The strikes will only make the Yemeni people stronger and more determined to confront you. Now, we did get this joint statement from the United States and the UK a little earlier today. It said that these strikes were successful and that they destroyed weapons storage sites, also missiles and drone systems. This statement went on to say that the precision strikes are intended to disrupt and degrade the capabilities that the Houthis use to threaten the global trade and lives of innocent mariners. And look, it marks the 8th round of these such strikes in the space of around 10 days, as this situation there in the Red Sea is certainly escalating. But look, the Houthis have been vowing that they will continue these strikes on ships travelling through that vital shipping route, as they have been since November, saying that they will not stop targeting any ships that are potentially even related to Israel, or any ships that are travelling to Israel, until the IDF pulls its forces out of the Gaza Strip. And look, in terms of going forward, in terms of what we could see next, we did hear the US National Security spokesperson John Kirby. He came out last week to say that the US is making it harder for the Houthis to continue these attacks, saying that the US has other options available in case this goes forward, but didn't elaborate on what those options are any further. There were 24 soldiers killed in the space of one day. This has been released early this morning. Condolences coming in from right around Israel's political spectrum. The Defence Minister, Yoav Gallant, he says the fall of the soldiers compels us to achieve the goals of the fighting. But so far, we haven't heard a statement from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, according to that IDF spokesperson that you mentioned a little earlier, this happened in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. These troops were reportedly inside a building, getting it ready for demolition when this building was hit by an RPG that was fired at this area. These buildings then apparently collapsed on these troops with a massive search and rescue mission then launched. The IDF says it is investigating to try and make sure this sort of incident doesn't happen again. But you mentioned the fighting that is ongoing inside the Gaza Strip, the heaviest fighting right now in that southern city of Khan Yunis. The Palestinian Red Crescent is ringing the alarm bells, posting on X that Israel is targeting its headquarters, saying that it's happening with artillery shelling coinciding with intense gunfire coming from drones. And look, that agency says that this is where many displaced people are actually trying to shelter. But we do need to mention that Khan Yunis, this is the largest city in southern Gaza. It is the area that the IDF, the Israeli military, believes is a Hamas stronghold. It says it's trying to clear Hamas terrorists from this area, and this is the same area that the head of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, comes from, and he is believed to be hiding in these underground labyrinth of tunnels that run right underneath the strip, potentially surrounding himself with some of the 130 plus hostages that do remain in the strip.
Now, Israel has proposed a multi-phase deal to Hamas, suggesting up to a 2-month pause in the fighting. The proposal, through Qatari and Egyptian mediators, includes a release of all remaining hostages held in Gaza. It came a day after Israel rejected a deal by Hamas. According to Israeli officials, more than 130 hostages are still being held in Gaza. Neither Israel nor Qatar nor Egypt has confirmed this development so far. Reports about the progress in peace talks came as US President Joe Biden's advisor, Brett McGurk, is traveling to West Asia. Meanwhile, the United States called on Israel to protect innocent people after Israeli forces stormed one hospital in Gaza. Israeli troops moved for the first time into Al-Mawasi district near the Mediterranean coast, west of Khan Yunis. The forces stormed Al-Khair Hospital and arrested medical staff in the main city in southern Gaza. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby on Monday said that Israel had a right to defend itself, but added that the US expects them to do so in accordance with international law.
We know that Hamas deliberately uses places like hospitals to store weapons, house their fighters, even to some degree for command and control. And so that places a special need on the Israeli Defense Forces. They have a right to defend themselves. They have a right to go after these leaders. They have a right to take away the ability for Hamas to store and resource themselves, even if that is in hospitals. But again, I would say the same thing that we've said before on this issue, that we expect them to do so in accordance with international law.
Further, Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz sidestepped discussion of a two-state solution at a meeting with European Union counterparts in Brussels on Monday. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell circulated a discussion paper with a roadmap to peace that calls for a preparatory peace conference organized by the EU and Arab nations. The US and the UN were also invited to be conveners in this. Shortly before a meeting with his counterparts from the 27 member states, Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki said that EU ministers must call for a ceasefire in Gaza.
We have to call collectively for a ceasefire. We cannot accept anything less. We cannot be hesitant about a ceasefire. Every day that we show hesitancy, people are being killed, innocent people are being killed, children and women and elderly, and this is intolerable and unacceptable. The life of Palestinians really matter, and we cannot accept that, the life of Palestinian children are being really treated less than the life of children anywhere in the world.
Staying within the region, now the likelihood that Lebanon is being drawn into this conflict, Israel-Hamas conflict, this likelihood is growing. Lebanon's caretaker Foreign Minister Abdallah Abu Habib on Monday said that concerns are growing that Lebanon could be dragged into this regional conflict in a spillover from the conflict. While addressing the US Council on Foreign Relations in New York, Abdallah Abu Habib said such a conflict would not be a picnic for Israel.
Yes, we worry that we are pushed to this war. Hezbollah has more means than Hamas had. And therefore, I mean, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be costly for everybody. Of course, Israel has the Air Force, and they can dominate the air and the land as well. But on the whole, it's going to be damaging for everybody. I think the Israelis know that. And I think that they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't attack. And if they really reach an agreement in Gaza, this would stop immediately and automatically would stop in southern Lebanon or northern Israel.
Now, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was in Ivory Coast's commercial capital, Abidjan, on Tuesday to meet President Alassane Ouattara. Blinken's trip is the latest in a series of visits to Africa by U.S. government figures as Washington seeks to boost ties with a continent where China's influence is strong and many countries maintain cordial relations with Russia. Ivory Coast and its neighbour Ghana are considered a first line of defence against the spread of groups like the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda from northern Sahel states, Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger. The US Secretary of State began a tour of 4 African countries on Monday and met Cape Verde's Prime Minister Ulysse Correa e Silva. Now, the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea have disrupted global shipping and stoked fears of global inflation. In the latest response, the US and the UK have conducted further strikes against Yemen's Houthis. My colleague Julia Chapman is in London. She gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Julia, the spillovers of the Israel-Hamas conflict clearly evident now.
It is indeed, Tanvi. As we've been hearing, the US and British forces carried out their second round of joint strikes against Yemen on Monday, targeting an underground storage site and missile and surveillance capabilities used by the Iran-backed Houthis. The group has been attacking cargo ships in the Red Sea, raising fears that global inflation could rise and deepening concern that the fallout from the Israel-Hamas conflict could destabilize the wider Middle East. In their latest response, the US and the UK carried out strikes against 8 different locations in Yemen, with support from Australia, Bahrain, Canada and the Netherlands. A senior US military official said around 25 to 30 munitions were fired, including from warplanes launched from a US aircraft carrier in the region. This attack is the 8th round of strikes launched by the US over the past month. So far, the effort has not managed to stop Houthi attacks against one of the world's busiest shipping routes. But British Foreign Minister David Cameron says military action aimed at degrading Houthi military capabilities in Yemen will continue.
What the Houthis are doing is unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's threatening the freedom of navigation. That's why we've taken the action. Alongside that action is a whole set of measures we'll be taking, including sanctions and other pressure to put on the Houthis, combined, of course, with the action the Royal Navy is taking with others in
the United Nations Security Council will hold a meeting on Tuesday to discuss the situation in the Middle East, looking in particular at the Israel-Hamas conflict. The meeting is aimed at working towards a political, security and humanitarian resolution of the crisis and finding a pathway towards a lasting ceasefire in Gaza. The UN Chief and Security Council members will discuss the two-state solution based on UN law and resolutions, although Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has played down that prospect in recent days, rejecting the idea of a Palestinian state. The UN Security Council meeting will be chaired by the French Foreign Minister, as France chairs the Council this month. NATO has signed a contract worth €1.1 billion to produce around 220,000 rounds of 155mm artillery ammunition. The military alliance struck the deal on behalf of several allies who will pass on some of the shells to Ukraine and use others to backfill their own supplies. The first deliveries of the ammunition is expected at the end of next year. At a press conference in Brussels, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg described the war in Ukraine as a battle of ammunition.
Just concluded contracts worth $1.2 billion. to buy hundreds of thousands of rounds of 155mm artillery ammunition. This demonstrates that NATO's tried and tested structure for joint procurement is delivering. Russia's war in Ukraine has become a battle for ammunition. So it is important that allies refill their own stocks as we continue to support Ukraine.
Russia says its forces launched multiple offensives against the Ukrainian army on Monday and shot down their jets, while Ukraine said its armed forces repelled Russian attacks. According to the Ukrainian military, at least 4 people were killed and 18 others were injured in missile attacks on its 2 biggest cities, Kyiv and Kharkiv. Residential buildings were damaged, as was a gas pipeline in Kharkiv. China's human rights record is under scrutiny at the United Nations on Tuesday. A review is being carried out by the UN Human Rights Council, with many Western countries pressing for more protections for Xinjiang Uyghurs and greater freedoms in Hong Kong. This is the first review since the global body's top rights official released a report in 2022 saying the detention of Uyghurs and other Muslims in China's Xinjiang region may amount to crimes against humanity. A Chinese delegation has been defending the country's record during a 70-minute testimony in Geneva. Beijing has denied any abuses and says it has lifted nearly 100 million people out of poverty. Former U.S. President Donald Trump remains the clear frontrunner as voting gets underway in the New Hampshire Republican primary. The northeastern state is the second to vote on which Republican should lead the party to challenge Joe Biden in November's presidential election. Nick Harper reports from Manchester, New Hampshire.
Well, here in New Hampshire, we'll see voting throughout the day on Tuesday. Polling stations throughout the state opened for Republicans to cast their vote to say which person they want leading the party in November's election and challenging the Democratic President Joe Biden. It has now come down to a 2-candidate race. Donald Trump, the former president, versus his UN ambassador, Nikki Haley. That's because another candidate, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, pulled out on Sunday saying he sees no path forward to victory. His polling numbers were very low here in New Hampshire. Perhaps just 4 or 5% of the state was expected to vote for him. In terms of the polling for the other 2 candidates, we still see Donald Trump way ahead, potentially anywhere between 11 to 19% ahead of Nikki Haley. Now, she needs to show that she is an alternative to Donald Trump, that she can present a different vision for the country, one that is different to Donald Trump's. And she's hoping that the moderate independent voters in this state could give her a win. She knows she needs to cause an upset by winning here or coming in a very strong second. We were at a rally that she had in the city of Exeter, New Hampshire, and she seemed to appeal to the younger, college-educated voters, many of her messages seeming to resonate with them. But this is perhaps her last best shot at showing that she can become the Republican nominee. A big win for Donald Trump may make it hard for Nikki Haley to hang on in the race, although she is saying no matter what happens here in New Hampshire, she intends to compete in the next few state-by-state primaries, one in Nevada and then one in South Carolina in just over a month's time. She's hoping to do well there as she is the former governor of that state. But it will all depend on what the results are here in New Hampshire on Tuesday evening. Nick Harper in Manchester, New Hampshire, reporting for DD India.
Ahead of the voting in New Hampshire, Trump took to the stage to woo the state's voters, saying Nikki Haley will be gone after the primary.
We had a very good competitor, Ron, as you know, Ron DeSantis, and he fought hard and he fought well, and now we have one left. We started off with, really, if you add some Democrats into it, we started off with 13, and now we're down to 2 people. And I think one person will be gone probably tomorrow. And the other one will be gone in November.
Nikki Haley did have an early win in New Hampshire when voting kicked off as per tradition at midnight in the small town of Dixville Notch. Only 6 registered voters there cast their ballots, 4 of them Republicans and 2 independents. All 6 of them backed Nikki Haley. Dixville Notch hasn't backed a winner in the Republican primary since choosing John McCain in 2008. The Democratic Party is also technically holding its New Hampshire primary on Tuesday, although it won't count towards the nomination. Incumbent Joe Biden isn't on the ballot in New Hampshire. His supporters in the state can still vote for him by writing his name on the ballot. If a non-listed candidate garners more votes than registered candidates, they win anyway. But bucking tradition, the Democrats decided this year to move their first primary election to the more diverse state of South Carolina. Businesses in the UK are warning that more disruption is approaching because of post-Brexit custom changes coming into effect later this month. Britain left the European Union in January 2021 and with it the single market. But many border checks with EU countries have been delayed to prepare businesses and port infrastructure. Many warn the country is still not ready to implement the tighter checks. In the opposite direction, the EU enforced its checks on the day the UK left the bloc. The added bureaucracy has left a dent in UK-EU trade, which could get worse with added checks. That's it from me here in London. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Julia. Julia Chapman joining us all from London. You're watching DD India Global. Still to come on the show. Devotees thronged in large numbers to the Ram temple in the Indian holy city of Ayodhya to participate in the first Aarti this morning after its consecration yesterday. Also on the other side, more about Oscar 2024 nominations, which will be announced today.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. On the sidelines of the recently concluded World Economic Forum's annual meet in Davos, the Chief Executive Officer for JP Morgan in Europe, the Middle East and Africa, Vishwas Raghavan, has hailed India's economic growth story. He said India is the engine of growth that the world lacks, and the country has managed to navigate geopolitical crises over the years favorably. CEO Raghavan further said that India is a beneficiary of global supply chain reforms and that valuations in India are at healthy levels that augur well for the market. Also speaking to media on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Jefferies India head Ashish Agrawal said that liquidity has improved significantly. Agrawal said Jefferies India has been involved in diverse deals ranging from $500 million to a range of $2 billion in a single stock, indicating that investors are having the visibility to deploy large ticket sizes. Agrawal also said that real estate and power sectors are seeing a strong pickup and domestic savings are projected to continue its upward trajectory this year. Senior executives at the global banking giant Jefferies said solid foundation building through reforms on the macro level and improved liquidity in the local market is making overseas investors bullish on India. Meanwhile, Bill Gates, who is a co-chair and board member of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, was all praise for India. He said that the country is making rapid progress on innovation and that the foundation is piloting new scalable ideas. While speaking on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum 2024 that was recently concluded, Gates spoke on India's rise as a global vaccine supplier as well. He said India is the volume leader by far with vaccines, starting with the Serum Institute to Bharat Biotech, and it is fantastic how they responded during the pandemic, he added. India is celebrating the Day of Valor, or Parakram Diwas, today. The day is celebrated across the country to commemorate the birth anniversary of the great freedom fighter Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, the leader of the Indian National Army who fought against the mighty British Empire in India's freedom struggle. Parakram Diwas celebration started from 2021 after Prime Minister Narendra Modi called on the nation to commemorate the occasion and pay tributes to all those luminaries who sacrificed their all during India's freedom movement. We have a report.
Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, one of the tallest leaders of India's freedom struggle, was born on 23rd January 1897. Netaji, who established the first independent government of India, was the second leader of Azad Hind Fauj, the Indian National Army, and played an instrumental role in the freedom struggle of India. To honor his indomitable spirit and invaluable contribution, the nation observed Parakram Diwas, Day of Valor, every year on 23rd January since 2021. Prime Minister Narendra Modi attended the 125th birth anniversary celebrations of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in Kolkata, where he said that Netaji gave new direction to the dream of independent India. PM Modi also asserted that Netaji is embodiment of India's might and inspiration.
नेताजी अखंड भारत की आजाद हिंद सरकार के पहले मुखिया थे और ये मेरा सौभाग्य है कि आजादी की उस पहली झलक को सुरक्षित रखने के लिए 2018 में हमने अंडमान के उस द्वीप का नाम नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस द्वीप रखा.
It was in 2022, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also paid tribute to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose on his 125th birth anniversary, unveiling a hologram statue of Netaji under the canopy near India Gate.
भारत मां के वीर सपूत नेताजी सुभाष की जन्म जयंती है. देश पराक्रम दिवस के रूप में इस प्रेरणा दिवस को मनाता है. दीवारें
Soon after the celebrations, the digital hologram statue was replaced by a 28-feet granite statue and was unveiled by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The statue is completely hand-sculpted using traditional techniques and modern tools. In New Delhi, Akshay Dongre, DD India.
And from New Delhi, we take you to the Indian holy city of Ayodhya, where the doors of the Ram temple were thrown open to the general public from this morning. Devotees in large numbers thronged to the Ram temple to participate in the first Aarti after the consecration ceremony yesterday. A large number of devotees gathered outside the temple for their darshan. For the past many days, the whole of Ayodhya is resonating with an unparalleled wave of devotional fervor, with the presence of thousands of sadhus, saints and devotees gathered there from across the world. And now we take a look at other stories making news around the world. A winter storm unleashed intense rain and caused widespread flooding in San Diego, with the mayor declaring a state of emergency. The heavy rain had led to a power outage for about 5,000 homes in San Diego, while many road schools were closed amid the downpour. Traditional Japanese dolls, flanked by tens of thousands of small hanging decorations, are drawing visitors to a hot spring area in the west of Tokyo. The exhibit includes 34 types of dolls and charms, each with a meaning. The version of the Hina Matsuri doll tradition is said to date back to the latter part of the Edo period in the 18th and 19th centuries. And the unveiling of nominees for the 96th Academy Awards is scheduled for Tuesday. Considering the outcomes of this year's Golden Globes and Critics' Choice Awards, the top contenders for nominations include Greta Gerwig's Barbie, Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, and Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. The nominations will be announced at around 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time in the United States, live from the Academy's Samuel Goldwyn Theatre in Los Angeles, and it can be viewed on the Academy's digital platforms. So that's all in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Tanvi Taneja. From my entire team in New Delhi, thank you for watching. Namaskar.